man sits, the darkest, most terrifying, and deepest man we all know. Seated on a black obsidian throne, the faint reflection of stars on its surface. A profound silence surrounds him, bearing the weight and secrets of thousands of years. The whispers of thousands of souls, the final pages of thousands of stories, the echoes of thousands of farewells. This man stands motionless in the midst of it all, waiting. He has waited so long that he no longer knows what he is waiting for. Hades. His name terrifies even the gods. Voices falter when his name is spoken. Even at the feasts of Olympus, even in those joyful moments when wine glasses clink, no one mentions his name, for it is synonymous with misfortune. To speak his name is to speak of death. They say his name invites darkness. This is precisely where the paradox begins. This god is one of the most powerful on Olympus, brother to Zeus, equal to Poseidon, lord of one of the three great kingdoms, and yet the loneliest, immortal but identified with death, king but no one visits his kingdom, powerful but everyone fears his power. How does a human live in exile in the realm of a god-king? Is every darkness truly evil, or do we behave that way because we cannot comprehend it? What if the most feared god was actually the one who suffered the most from loneliness? Tonight, we will find the answers to these questions. Tonight's topic is the unknowns of Hades, or his misunderstood characteristics. Welcome. Tonight, I don't know where you are. You may be lying in your room, your eyes closing with the fatigue of the day. You may be traveling, watching the view from the window or the darkness of the night. Maybe you just needed some silence and came here. Wherever you are listening from, I am happy to accompany you tonight. How was your day? Was it easy or difficult? Maybe a little tiring, maybe a little complicated. But now, this moment is yours alone. Take a deep breath. Feel your shoulders relax. Let go of the burdens of the day, just for this moment. Tonight, our story takes us back thousands of years. The universe is just beginning to take shape, in a time when titans and gods lived. But in truth, this story is beyond time. Loneliness is always the same loneliness in every age. Being misunderstood is the same pain in every age. And the search for acceptance is the same longing in every age. Now you can slowly close your eyes or enjoy the view, it doesn't matter. Just listen, let the story take you on a journey. Because tonight, we will descend into the depths of darkness. But don't be afraid. Darkness is not your enemy tonight. Darkness is the story itself. Are you ready? Then let's begin. From the very beginning of the story, from the moment when nothing existed. In the beginning there was nothing. There was no world, no sky, no sea, not even light, not even darkness. There was only chaos, an infinite, formless, undefined void. Chaos cannot be defined, neither large nor small, neither cold nor hot, with no specific shape. It simply exists, before everything, beyond everything. And then the first beings emerged from chaos. Gaia, the earth, Tartaros, the depths, Eros, desire, and Erebos and Nyx, darkness and night. These first beings were the foundation of the universe. Before them, there was nothing. After them, everything became possible. Gaia created Uranus, the sky, from her own body, and Uranus covered Gaia like an endless embrace. From this embrace, the stars were formed, and from their union, mountains were born. The Titans were born at the same time. The Titans were powerful, mighty, and fearless. Kronos was the youngest and bravest of them. He listened to his mother Gaia's complaints and put an end to his father Urano's tyranny. With a sharp sickle, he crippled his father and seized power. And so, the age of the Titans began. Kronos married his sister Rhea. Together, they would create a new generation of gods. But fate, strangely, repeated itself. Just as Uranus feared his own children, so did Kronos. There was a prophecy, an ancient prophecy. One of your own children will overthrow you. Kronos began to live with this fear. This fear gnawed at him from within, making him restless. When Rhea became pregnant, Kronos waited calmly. A patient, silent, and dark wait. And when the child was born, Hestia, small and innocent, Kronos took her. He looked at her for a moment, perhaps hesitated for a moment. But then he opened his mouth and swallowed her. Like a simple morsel. Rhea screamed and cried. But there was nothing she could do. Then Demeter was born. Same end. Hera, same end. Poseidon, same end. Then Hades. The night Hades was born, the sky was covered with clouds. The moon was not visible. The stars were hidden. It was as if the universe itself was trying to hide this birth, as if fate itself wanted to protect this child. But fate was not stronger than Kronos' fear. Rhea held her baby in her arms. Little Hades opened his eyes and looked at the world. The first thing he saw was his mother's face. Tired, sad, but full of love. The second thing he saw was his father's shadow, falling over him, covering everything. Kronos approached. His steps were heavy, determined. Rhea held her baby tightly, hoping that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time he would show mercy. But there was no mercy in Kronos' eyes. Only fear and a determination dulled by fear. He took the baby. Hades' eyes met his mother's for the last time. Who knows what those eyes said, what they conveyed? Understanding, fear, or just childish curiosity. But that look was etched into his mother's memory. That look was never forgotten for thousands of years. Then, darkness became complete darkness. The strangest prison in the universe was probably Kronos' belly. Because hot and cold, narrow and wide, everything was felt simultaneously with its exact opposite. Time flowed differently there, or perhaps not at all. Hades and his 4 siblings stayed here together. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Poseidon, and finally Hades. The 5 siblings waited inside their father. What awaited them? Death? Salvation? What would happen to them? Hades grew up here. Yes, he grew up because that's what gods do. Not physically, but he trained his will. His thoughts deepened, his perception sharpened. He got used to the darkness, he got used to the silence. While his other siblings complained, whined, and screamed, Hades remained silent. He observed. He listened. He thought. Perhaps that is why, later, he became the Lord of Darkness. Because darkness was his first teacher. Darkness taught him patience, taught him to wait, taught him to be self-sufficient. But at the same time, darkness taught him something else. Loneliness. His siblings were close by, yes, but everyone was preoccupied with their own pain. Everyone was struggling with their own despair. No one really saw each other, no one really listened to each other. And Hades learned what it meant to be alone, even in a crowd. This was his first experience of exclusion. Within the family, among his siblings, but still outside. Still alone. Time passed. How much time passed, no one knew. Perhaps months, years, perhaps centuries. Time could not be measured inside Kronos' belly. Until one day there was a tremor. Something was happening outside. Sounds were coming, muffled and distant. Then, suddenly, everything changed. Light came. The first light Hades saw was the most beautiful thing in his life, but also the most painful. After years, perhaps centuries, in darkness, his eyes were not ready for this brightness. It hurt, it burned, it blinded him. But it also brought freedom, a freedom he felt for the first time. Kronos had vomited. Zeus, still a young Zeus, had tricked his father and saved his siblings. There was a stone. Rhea had once made Kronos swallow a stone instead of Zeus. There was a drink that made Kronos vomit. Hades stumbled as he emerged from the darkness. For the first time, his feet touched the ground. For the first time, air filled his lungs, real air. He saw the sky, the stars, and the moon. It was beautiful, painfully beautiful. His siblings were around him, all experiencing the same shock. Hestia was crying. Whether from happiness or pain, it was unclear. Demeter had collapsed to the ground, her hands buried in the earth, unable to believe in its existence. Hera stood upright, her eyes locked on Kronos, blazing with anger. Poseidon, however, was laughing, wildly, madly, savoring his freedom. And Hades just watched. Silently, he absorbed everything, this new world, this bright universe. But somewhere inside him, a small corner, was still dark. He still carried that darkness. The fuse of the war was lit here. The Titanomachy, the war of the gods and the titans. It lasted more than 10 years. Mountains shook and shifted. Seas swelled and pounded the shores. The sky burned with fire. Zeus hurled his lightning bolts. Poseidon created earthquakes. But Hades donned the helmet of invisibility given to him by the Cyclopes and moved silently among the shadows. No one saw him or heard him. They could not sense his presence. But he was there in every battle, in every clash. Silently, invisibly, but effectively. The war ended, victory was won. When the celebrations began, Hades was again in the shadows. He mingled with the crowd gathered around Zeus. No one congratulated him. No one thanked him. No one said, "You were here too." They dedicated the victory to Zeus. The congratulations and applause were all for Zeus. Hades got used to this too. Then came the lottery. The three brothers gathered, Zeus, Poseidon, Hades. They would divide the three great kingdoms, the skies, the seas, and the underworld. The world outside these three kingdoms would be common ground for everyone. But the other three realms would be shared among the brothers. The lottery was drawn. Zeus took the heavens. He became the master of lightning, clouds, and stars. The highest place, the brightest kingdom, the most visible throne. Poseidon took the seas. He became the master of waves, storms, and oceans. A vast, endless, powerful kingdom. And what about Hades? Hades took the underworld, the darkness, the silence, the realm of the dead. What was Hades' reaction at that moment? No one knew, no one looked at him, no one paid attention. Zeus was glowing with the vision of his new kingdom. Poseidon felt the power of the seas. But Hades just bowed his head and looked at his fate. Darkness. Darkness again, a dark fate. He had emerged from Kronos' belly, seen the light, tasted freedom. And now he was being sent back into darkness. This time not by his own will, but by misfortune. Yet he had the right to object and did not. This time not as a prisoner, but as a king. But being king did not change his loneliness. That night, before leaving Olympus, Hades looked up at the sky. The stars were shining. The moon was smiling. When would he see the sky again? There was no sky underground, no stars, no moon. Only stone, earth, and endless darkness. For a single moment, even if only for a brief instant, he thought of returning. He thought of saying no. He thought of saying, "I don't want this kingdom," but he didn't say it. Hades was never a god who shirked his duties and responsibilities. Without complaining, without whining, without blaming. Whatever fate gave him, he took. Whatever life burdened him with, he carried. And so he set out for his kingdom. His steps were heavy, those first steps. With each step, the light dimmed a little more. With each step, the warmth dropped a little more. With each step, the sounds grew a little more distant. The first thing he encountered was the river Styx. Styx, the boundary of the underworld, the line between the living and the dead. Its waters were pitch black, with no reflection on the surface. It was not a flowing mirror, but a flowing abyss. Hades stood on the riverbank and looked down. He could not see his own reflection. Only an endless depth, only suffocating darkness. Charon was there, the ferryman. Old and bony, his eyes sunken, his hands wrapped around the oars. He looked at Hades, said nothing. He recognized his god, accepted his master. He only bowed his head and prepared his boat. Hades boarded the boat. As they moved down the river, sounds came from the water. Whispers, moans, echoes. The voices of the dead, echoes of the lives they left behind, their regrets and sins. Hades listened to every voice, every story. Finally, something stirred within him, a responsibility, a bond. He embraced these spirits and stories, taking them under his protection. He formed a bond with them. When they crossed the river, Kerberos greeted him. The three-headed dog, guardian of the underworld. Enormous, terrifying, eyes blazing like fire. A nightmare for others, but for Hades it would be something else. Hades approached the dog, extended his hand. Kerberos growled at first, then sniffed, then fell silent. And then one of its three heads touched Hades' palm. Accepted. This was Hades' first friendship in the underworld. Perhaps it would be his only friendship for a long time. Over time, he began to explore the vastness and boundaries of his kingdom. The depths of Tartarus, the place of the punished, filled with pain and regret. The Asphodel Meadows, the place of ordinary dead, neither good nor bad, just gray and faded. And in the distance, a glimmer, Elysium, the place of heroes and the virtuous eternal peace. The new king traveled to every corner of his kingdom. He examined every corner. Slowly, an order began to form in his mind, and as it took shape, he began to establish his order. There must be justice and laws here too, he thought. Every soul should be judged according to their life. Every action, both past and future, should have a consequence. Hades appointed 3 judges, Minos, Aeacus, and Rhadamanthus. All had once been human, all were known for their justice. Now, in immortality, they would continue the same duty. Finally, he built his throne. The jet-black obsidian throne, in the heart of darkness, at the center of silence. When he sat down, he felt the coldness of the stone. Looking around, he saw endless emptiness. And for a moment, just a moment, he closed his eyes. Now this is my home and my kingdom, he murmured. The words vanished into the void. No one heard, no one answered. Only silence. Always just silence. There was something Hades did not yet know. This dark kingdom would change him. Or perhaps he would change this dark kingdom. Days passed. Months passed. Years, centuries, perhaps millennia. Time flowed differently underground. No sun, no moon, no cycle of seasons. There was only an endless now, an unchanging moment. Hades grew accustomed to this flow or learned to adapt. He measured time by the arrival of souls, in waves after wars, in floods after plagues, in a thin stream during times of peace. Each soul brought a story. Each soul carried the summary of a life. Hades listened to them all. The fall of kings, the heroism of slaves, the sacrifice of mothers, the remorse of traitors. Thousands, millions of stories, all different, all sharing the same essence. Birth, life, death, love, loss, betrayal, and the end. Hades embraced these stories, carrying their weight on his shoulders. These stories were the greatest catalyst for Hades's growth. He rarely went up to Olympus, only when Zeus summoned him, reluctantly and unwillingly. for grand councils, important decisions when the gods gathered. But each time he experienced the same thing. When he first appeared, everyone turned and looked. There was no welcome in those glances, no emotion. These glances were discomfort. Faces tensed, smiles faded, conversations stopped. It was as if a disease had entered the room, as if a chill had spread through the air. "The smell of death," someone whispered, but loud enough to be heard. Hades heard it. He always heard it. He said nothing. He stood in the corner, listened silently, did what was required of him, and left. Always the same vicious cycle. The only difference was that each time he came and went, he was a little more wounded, a little more excluded. Zeus never treated him like an enemy, but he didn't see him as a brother either. He was simply indifferent. He saw his brother, but he didn't see him. He acknowledged his existence, but he didn't value him. For Zeus, Hades was responsible for a necessary task, a tool, a function, not a brother. Poseidon would occasionally speak with Hades. He would always talk about the roar of the seas, the power of storms, the dance of the waves. But he never said, "How are you, brother?" He never said, "I missed you." He never really listened. He only talked about himself. And the others? Hera, Demeter, Hestia? They were lost in their own worlds, their own problems. They had grown up in the same darkness, yes. But now they were in the light and had forgotten the past. Or they wanted to forget. Once, during a feast, Hades tried to sit at the table. There were empty chairs, yes. But wherever he sat, the god next to him would get up with some excuse. "Ah, I must fetch the wine. Ah, I need some air. Ah, I must speak with Aphrodite." And Hades was left alone, in the middle of the table. Emptiness around him, distance around him. That night, as he returned underground, he didn't look at the stars. What was the point? Sitting on his throne underground, he asked himself questions and searched for answers. "What was I?" he muttered. "Why is this? Why does everyone stay away from me? From the moment I was born, darkness has never left me. Darkness in Kronos' belly, now darkness around this throne. Even if I reach the light does not accept me." His fingers clenched the arm of the throne. The obsidian was cold, always cold. "Perhaps I am not worthy of love," he said aloud into the void. "Perhaps darkness is my nature. Perhaps loneliness is my destiny." The words vanished into the air. Not a single answer came. How could it, anyway? There was no one here. Only shadows, spirits, and silence. Hades sank deeper into silence. For days, months, years, he did not rise from his throne. He ruled his kingdom. He upheld justice. But something inside him was slowly freezing. Something was fading, a hope, an expectation. Until one day, a day he never expected, without news from Olympus, without a call, without an invitation. Instead, Hades made a decision himself, something he rarely did, to go up to the surface. Why? He didn't know himself. Maybe he was bored, maybe he was curious, maybe he just wanted to see the sky. He put on his invisibility helmet, rose up among the shadows, and came out into the world. It was a beautiful spring day. Hades didn't remember spring. In his kingdom, there were no seasons, no colors, no flowers. But here on earth, everything was alive and vibrant. Green leaves, colorful flowers, birdsong, the buzzing of bees, warm sun, sweet wind, the smell of fresh earth. Hades paused for a moment and simply looked. It was beautiful, incredibly beautiful. And then he saw her. In the middle of a meadow, among the flowers, a young woman. Her hair shone like gold in the sun, her dress fluttering in the wind. She was bent over, examining a flower, her fingers lightly touching the leaves. And she smiled a small, cheerful smile. Hades' heart stopped. No, it didn't stop, but it felt that way. Something tightened in his chest. His breath caught. His hand went to his chest without him realizing it. What was this? What was this feeling? Something he hadn't felt in thousands of years. Something he couldn't define. That young woman was a goddess. Demeter's daughter, Persephone. Hades had seen her before when he was very young, in a corner of Olympus. But he hadn't paid attention then. Other things were on his mind. Now, however, he couldn't take his eyes off her. Persephone seemed to sense something, raised her head, furrowed her brow slightly, tilted her head to the side. For a moment, she looked in the direction Hades was standing. She couldn't see him, his helmet made him invisible. Then she shrugged and returned to her flower. Hades stayed there for a long time. He watched from afar, hidden in the shadows. Persephone gathered flowers, unaware, talked with her friends, laughed, sang songs. Hades watched every moment, engraving every detail in his memory. When the sun began to set, Persephone returned home, and Hades returned to the underworld. But something had changed. Hades didn't feel the same when he returned to his home, to his throne. His throne was less cold, his kingdom less dark and less suffocating. The image of her in his mind created a light. Persephone. At that moment, Hades faced the most difficult decision of his life. He wanted to possess her. No, possess was the wrong word. He wanted to be with her, to be by her side, to hear her voice, to see her smile. Someone to share this loneliness with, someone to illuminate this darkness. But how would that be possible? He couldn't go to Olympus and ask for her openly. Demeter would never allow it. She loved Persephone, protected her, didn't want to share her with anyone. And Hades? Hades was the worst option in Demeter's eyes. The Lord of Darkness, the God of Death, the King of the underworld. Giving her daughter to him would be like burying her alive for Demeter. What if he couldn't go directly to Persephone? Couldn't he approach her, talk to her, get to know her? He tried. One day he took off his helmet and walked into the meadow. Persephone was there again, among the flowers. Hades approached, step by step, his heart pounding in his chest. But before he was 10 steps away, Persephone's friends saw him. As always, they screamed, "The god of death!" and began to flee. Of course, they dragged Persephone with them. Hades remained where he was. He could only watch them leave. That was Hades. That was always the case. Fear, escape, rejection. That night, Hades descended to the deepest point of the underworld, to the edge of Tartarus, the quietest and darkest place. He plunged into endless thoughts. Maybe I'm going down the wrong path, he said to himself. Maybe normal paths aren't for me. Maybe I will always be different. Maybe I need to find different paths. This thought was dangerous. But Hades was so alone, so hopeless, that he was ready to take the risk. He went to Zeus, the master of Olympus, the great brother, the ruler of the universe. Hades stood before him and stated his request. "I want Persephone," he said, "as my queen." Zeus thought for a moment. Perhaps he considered his brother's happiness. Perhaps he made political calculations. Perhaps he was simply bored and wanted to settle the matter. Whatever the case, his answer was unexpected. "Take her," said Zeus, "but not without asking Demeter. She will never consent." Was this permission, provocation, a trap? Hades didn't know. But did he care? He was so lonely, so hungry for love, touch, togetherness. He couldn't let this chance slip away. Maybe it was wrong, maybe it was a mistake, maybe it would make everything worse. But at least he would try. At least once he would fight for his own happiness. And so the plan was set. Hades waited. He waited for the right moment, the right day, the right conditions. And one spring day, Persephone was in that meadow again, among the flowers. But this time there was a special flower. A narcissus flower. A flower unlike any other on earth. Hades had placed it there like bait, like an invitation. Persephone saw the flower. Her eyes lit up, and she approached it curiously. She bent down, her fingers reaching for the flower. And at that moment the earth split open. A dark abyss opened. A chariot rose from the depths, black horses, golden wheels. And in the chariot stood Hades. Persephone screamed. Fear, shock, panic. But Hades grabbed her, pulled her into the chariot, and plunged into the darkness. Above, her friends were calling her. Persephone, Persephone. Their voices grew fainter and fainter, and finally silence. As they descended into the underworld, Hades looked at Persephone. She was scared, yes. She was trembling, crying. And Hades, in that moment, realized what he had done. He had kidnapped her. Without permission, without consent, by force. Something tightened in his chest. Regret? Guilt? Or just the weight of reality? But there was no turning back now. What was done, and Hades had to bear this burden too, like all the other burdens. The descent into the underworld lasted as long as eternity. As the chariot passed through the darkness, Persephone's screams slowly turned into sobs, the sobs into silent tears, the tears into numb shock. Everything around her was changing, the light fading, the warmth dropping, the colors fading. The world she had left behind, flower-filled meadows, laughing friends, the warm sun, was fading away like a dream. The descent into the underworld lasted as long as eternity. As the chariot passed through the darkness, Persephone's screams slowly turned into sobs, the sobs into silent tears, the tears into numb shock. Everything around her was changing, the light fading, the warmth dropping, the colors fading. The world she had left behind, flower-filled meadows, laughing friends, the warm sun, was fading away like a dream. Hades held the reins tightly. His eyes were fixed ahead, his face expressionless. But his hands, the hands holding the reins, trembled slightly. Persephone didn't see this, couldn't see it. The darkness was too thick, the fear too great. When they reached the river Styx, Charon was waiting. The old boatman was silent, as always, but there was a question in his eyes. He looked at Hades, then at Persephone, then back at Hades. But he asked nothing. He simply prepared his boat, simply dipped his oars into the water. Persephone looked at the black waters of the river. Nothing reflected on the surface, not even her own face. It was as if this water swallowed everything, light, image, hope. From below, from the depths, whispers came. The voices of the dead, echoes of the past, the last words of thousands of stories. She trembled. Was it from the cold, from fear, or from the weight of reality? She didn't know herself. When they reached the opposite shore, Kerberos greeted them. The three-headed giant dog, with terrifying teeth and eyes like fire. Persephone recoiled, hiding behind Hades, without even realizing it herself. And Hades paused for a moment. Persephone's hand had touched the hem of his robe, clinging to it. This small touch, this unintentional movement, stirred something in his chest. Protective instinct. Kerberos, said Hades, his voice calm but authoritative. This is your queen. All three heads turned to Persephone at once. They sniffed, examined, assessed, and then, unexpectedly, the middle head bowed. An acceptance, a sign of respect. The other two heads followed suit. Persephone looked on in astonishment. The creature she had just thought would cause her death was now bowing before her. This world, this dark kingdom, was nothing like she had expected. As they walked toward his palace, Hades showed her his kingdom. He pointed to the ominous gates of Tartarus from afar, described the pale beauty of the asphodel meadows, spoke of the distant glow of Elysium. His voice was monotonous, like a guide, like a host, but there was something beneath it, a hope, an expectation. Perhaps Persephone would like this place, perhaps she would grow accustomed to it over time, perhaps she would learn to love it. Persephone listened silently. Her eyes scanned everything, recording every detail. The fear was still there, yes, but something else had joined it. Curiosity. This place was terrifying, yes, but it was also fascinating. Nothing on earth resembled it, no experience had prepared her for this. When they reached the throne room, Hades stopped. "This is your home now," he said. The words caught in his throat, not coming out as he wanted. Was he too harsh? Too cold? Should he have said something softer? Persephone looked at the throne room. The obsidian throne stood alone in the darkness. There was no second throne beside it. Made for only one king, designed only for solitude. "Why?" Persephone said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was low, trembling, but there was a hardness in it. "Why did you bring me here?" Hades struggled to respond. How could he explain thousands of years of solitude? How could he describe the exclusion on Olympus, the empty chairs at feasts, the whispers of the smell of death? And most importantly, how could he put into words the moment he first saw her, the moment his heart stopped? "Because," he began. He paused. He started again. "Because I was alone." 3 words. A summary of thousands of years. 3 words, and within them a universe. Persephone looked at him. A long, careful look. What was in that look? Understanding? Pity? Or just appraisal? Hades didn't know. He couldn't read it. He had been the judge of the dead for thousands of years. He saw the secrets of souls, but he couldn't decipher what was in the eyes of this young goddess. And that night, Persephone was given a separate room. The most beautiful room in the underworld, bathed in the light of Elysium, its walls covered in precious stones. Hades paused at the door for a moment, perhaps wanting to say something, but he couldn't. He just bowed his head and left. In his own room, lying in the darkness, he thought, "What have I done?" he asked himself. "I brought her here, but now what? I can't expect her to love me. I brought her here by force, I kidnapped her. This isn't love. This is captivity." He closed his eyes. Sleep did not come. Only regret came, wave after wave. But in the morning, if there is such a thing as morning in the underworld, something unexpected happened. Persephone came to the throne room, alone, unafraid, curious. She examined the room, touched the walls, looked at the ceiling, and then she approached Hades' throne. "There is no other throne beside this one," she said. "Why?" Hades looked at her in surprise. He hadn't expected that question. "Because there was no one. No one at all. No one. No one." Persephone thought for a moment. Then she said something completely unexpected. "Then one should be made." Hades didn't know what to say. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. This young goddess, who had been kidnapped just yesterday, who had been crying just yesterday, now wanted a throne to accompany him? "You want to stay here?" Persephone shrugged. "It's not about wanting. I'm here. It's a fact. It makes more sense to accept facts than to fight them. At least for now." Was this acceptance, surrender, or a strategic move? Hades didn't know, but he didn't care. Because for the first time in thousands of years, Someone was considering being by his side. Whatever the reason, whatever the motivation, this was a beginning. Beginnings mattered. Days passed. Hades and Persephone were in a strange dance. They approached and distanced themselves, spoke and fell silent, looked at each other and looked away. Persephone began to explore the underworld. She walked along the banks of the Styx, examined the pale flowers of asphodel, sat in the light of Elysium, and Hades watched from afar, always from a distance, always distant. But sometimes, very rarely, they were together. One day, Persephone asked Hades a question. These souls, did they all once live? Yes, said Hades. Each one lived a life. They loved, they lost, they laughed, they cried. And then they came here. And you, do you know their stories? Hades nodded. All of them. Every single one. Tell me, said Persephone. Tell me one of them. Hades told her. The story of a shepherd, a man who lived alone but happily in the mountains with his flock, the woman he loved, the child he lost, the peace he found, and finally, death. Every detail, every emotion, every moment. Persephone listened quietly. When the story ended, her eyes were moist. That's beautiful, she said. Sad, but beautiful. Death is always sad, said Hades. But that doesn't make it meaningless. Every ending is the completion of a story. Every death is the seal of a life. Persephone looked at him. A different look this time. Beyond curiosity, a fearless look. Perhaps for the first time she was truly seeing Hades. Not the Lord of Darkness, but the guardian of stories. Not the god of death, but the keeper of memories. Under that gaze, Hades felt something he hadn't felt in thousands of years. To be seen. To be truly seen. That night they sat side by side. They didn't speak, they just sat. In the darkness, in the silence, together. This togetherness spoke more than words ever could. But above, on the surface, a storm was brewing. Demeter was searching for her daughter. Ever since that terrible day, ever since the day Persephone's scream echoed, Demeter had been roaming the world. She crossed mountains, sailed seas, combed forests. She looked under every rock, searched every cave, questioned every river. But her daughter was nowhere to be found. She was nowhere. Demeter's grief changed the world. She was the goddess of fertility, mother of the earth, protector of the harvest, source of growth. But now her heart was broken. Fertility cannot flow from a broken heart. The leaves turned yellow slowly at first, then quickly. The trees stood bare, their branches reaching toward the sky like bones. The flowers wilted, the fruits rotted, the crops withered. The world lost its colors. The cold came. The first winter in history. People did not know this, they had never experienced it before. They froze, shivering under the freezing winds. They could not find food. Hunger knocked on their doors. And they began to die one by one, dozens, hundreds, thousands. Demeter did not care about any of this. Her only thought was her daughter. Her only goal was to find her. She went up to Olympus, stood before Zeus, begged, screamed, threatened. "Where is my daughter?" she cried. "What have you done to her?" Zeus shifted uncomfortably on his throne. He knew the truth, of course he knew. He had given Hades permission. But now, seeing the consequences, the weight of that decision fell heavily on his shoulders. "Hades took her," he said finally. "He took her to the underworld. She will be his queen." Demeter's scream echoed off the walls of Olympus. "No!" she cried. "No, no, no. I will not allow him to bury my daughter in darkness. I will not allow him to imprison her among the dead." "Calm down," said Zeus. "Hades will treat her well. She will be queen. She will be respected. she will gain power. Power! Demeter's eyes burned with fury. She is my daughter, child of light. You will rot her in the darkness. Demeter made a vow. Until Persephone returned, the world would see no fertility. Until Persephone emerged into the light, nothing would grow. There would be no season but winter, no harvest but death. Zeus understood the gravity of the situation. People were dying, the world was freezing. As the dead increased, the sacrifices offered to the gods decreased. The temples emptied, the prayers ceased. The gods drew their power from the faith of humans. If humans disappeared, the gods would also weaken. Something had to be done. Zeus summoned Hermes, the messenger of the gods, the young god with winged sandals. Swift, cunning, reaching everywhere. Zeus gave him a task, a simple but heavy one. Go down to the underworld, said Zeus. Tell Hades, return Persephone. This is an order. Hermes bowed his head and set off. Hades would never forget that day. He sat in his throne room, Persephone beside him. In recent days, Persephone had begun to sit closer. First in the opposite corner of the room, then a few steps nearer, now almost beside him. This closeness was more precious to Hades than anything. They were talking. Old stories, secrets of the underworld, memories of the surface. Persephone was telling him about her mother, the flowery meadows, the warmth of the sun. Hades listened, his eyes on Persephone's face, absorbing every word. Then the door opened. Hermes entered. He had a strange expression on his face, serious but also troubled. He paused when he saw Hades, raised his eyebrows when he saw Persephone. Hades, Hermes said, there is a message from Zeus. Hades's heart tightened. He knew even before hearing the message. He had always known this moment would come. He had only hoped it wouldn't, only wanted a little more time. Speak, he said, his voice hoarse. Return Persephone, said Hermes. Demeter's mourning is killing the world. People are dying of hunger. This cannot continue. Persephone must return to the surface. Silence. A heavy, suffocating, endless silence. Hades looked at Persephone. Persephone looked at Hades. Words flew between them. Unspoken words, unexpressed feelings. Must you go? Asked Hades, his voice barely audible. Persephone did not answer. Her eyes were on Hades' eyes, searching for something there. What was she searching for? Permission? An obstacle? Or just a sign? Hermes cleared his throat. It's an order, he said. From Zeus. It cannot be disobeyed. Hades bowed his head. Of course it couldn't be disobeyed. Hadn't it always been that way? He couldn't disobey when he was thrown into Kronos' belly. He couldn't resist when the underworld was given to him. He couldn't resist when he was banished from Olympus. And now, as his only happiness was being taken from him, he couldn't resist. All right, he said. One word. A universe within it. Persephone stood up. She paused for a moment, as if she were going to say something. But she didn't. She just turned and followed Hermes. As she walked toward the door, Hades watched her from behind. He followed her every step, recorded her every movement. When Persephone reached the threshold, she paused for a moment. She didn't turn around, but she paused. Hades, in that moment, gathered all his courage. Persephone, he said. Persephone turned. Were her eyes moist, or was it just the play of the darkness? Hades' voice broke. I loved you. I wanted you to know that. I loved you. The words hung in the air. Something changed on Persephone's face. A softening, a breaking, something. But she didn't know what to say, or couldn't say it. She just bowed her head slightly and left. The door closed. and Hades remained alone on his throne. It's hard to describe what happened next. Time passed, but for Hades time lost all meaning. Hours? Days? Weeks? It didn't matter. He didn't rise from his throne, didn't move, didn't speak. He just sat there, his eyes fixed on the spot where the door had closed. Kerberos came at one point, anxious. His 3 heads looked at his master, sensing something was wrong. He lay down at Hades' feet, offering warmth and loyalty. But Hades didn't even notice him. The souls continued their flow. They crossed the Styx, were judged, and went to their places. The kingdom functioned, the mechanism turned. But there was no king. The king was there physically, but his spirit was elsewhere. And finally, one night Hades rose. He descended from his throne, slowly, with heavy steps. He left the palace, passing through dark corridors. He didn't know where he was going, or perhaps he did but wouldn't admit it to himself. His feet carried him to Tartarus, the darkest place in the depths, to the edge of the abyss. He stopped there. He looked down. An endless darkness, an abyss with no bottom. This was the place of the damned, of the worst criminals, of the darkest souls. This was the place of pain, of regret, of endless suffering. And Hades felt he belonged to that abyss. His knees buckled. He collapsed to the ground, the coldness of the stones piercing his kneecaps. His hands clasped the earth, his fingers digging into the rocks. His head fell forward, his shoulders slumped. And finally, what he had held for thousands of years was released. A single tear fell, into the darkness, onto the stones, into eternity. Then another drop, and another drop. Hades was crying, silently, with trembling shoulders, with muffled sobs. Thousands of years of accumulation, thousands of years of loneliness, rejection, invisibility, were now turning into tears. "Why?" he whispered. The word vanished into the darkness. Why was it always like this? Why did everything he touched slip through his fingers? Why was he unworthy of love, of acceptance? When Kronos swallowed him, what had he done wrong? A baby, innocent, sinless. But he was sent into darkness. When the lot was cast, what had he done wrong? He was just unlucky. But she had been sent into the darkness again. On Olympus, at the feasts, what had she done wrong? She was just there, she just existed. But she had been excluded again, pushed away again. And now Persephone. For the first time, she had opened up to someone, loved for the first time, hoped for the first time. And she had lost again. "Perhaps I was not created to be loved," she said aloud into the darkness. "Perhaps this is my fate. Darkness, loneliness, endless, unchanging loneliness." The words hung in the air. No one answered. No one comforted her. No one said, "No, it's not like that." Only silence. Always only silence. Hades remained there. He didn't know for how long. Time there on the edge of Tartarus was meaningless. His tears dried up, his breathing slowed, his trembling stopped. But the pain inside him, the emptiness inside him, remained exactly the same. And finally, very finally, he raised his head. He looked into the darkness. He looked into the bottom of the abyss. And he realized something. This darkness was his darkness. This abyss was his depth. This pain was his pain. And if he was the master of this darkness, this depth, this pain, then he could bear them. He had to bear them, because no one else could. He slowly stood up. The marks of the stones on his knees had left a mark on his body. The marks of the tears in his eyes had left a mark on his soul. But he was standing, still standing. "Fine," he said to himself. "If I have to be alone, I will be alone. If I am not loved, I will not be loved. But I will still be me. I will still be the king of this kingdom. I will still uphold justice. I will still maintain order. Was this acceptance? Was it surrender? Or was it something else? Perhaps all of them. Perhaps none of them. Hades returned to his throne. He sat down. He closed his eyes. And he began to wait. He didn't know what he was waiting for. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps just for time to pass, for the pain to dull, for the memories to fade. But fate worked in strange ways, and Hades did not yet know that the story did not end here. Up above, on earth, other things were happening. Persephone had been reunited with her mother. Demeter had embraced her daughter, cried, laughed, and cried again. The world was slowly coming back to life. The snow was melting, flowers were blooming, leaves were turning green. But Persephone was different. No one noticed at first. Her mother was too happy, too busy celebrating. Her friends were too excited, too busy asking questions. But Persephone would sometimes stare into the distance. Sometimes she would fall silent. Sometimes, even under the sun, she would shiver. It was as if a part of her was missing, as if she had left something behind. And then the truth came out. Persephone had eaten pomegranate seeds underground. 6 pomegranate seeds. Tiny, red, sweet. The fruits of the underworld, the fruits of the land of the dead. Whoever ate them would be bound to that place. It was an ancient rule, an unbreakable law. When Demeter found out, she screamed. "No," she said. "This can't be. My daughter cannot be bound to the underworld." But the laws were above even the gods. Those who ate the pomegranate seeds belonged to the underworld. Persephone had eaten 6. She would spend 6 months underground every year. Zeus intervened and brokered a compromise. 6 months underground, 6 months above ground. Persephone would be divided between 2 worlds. Demeter would not lose her daughter entirely. And Hades would not be completely alone. This was a painful compromise for everyone. But perhaps it was the right compromise. And the seasons were born. When Persephone was above ground, Demeter would be happy. The world would blossom, spring and summer would come. When Persephone descended underground, Demeter would mourn. The world would wither, autumn and winter would come. This cycle would continue forever. And Hades, upon receiving this news, was sitting on his throne. Hermes had come again with a message. But this time the message was different. "Persephone will return," said Hermes. "Every year, for 6 months, she will be with you." Hades, for a moment, felt nothing. The words hit his ears like meaningless sounds. Then, slowly, meaning began to take shape. She will return. Persephone would return. Not completely, yes. Not forever, yes. But she would return. Every year, for 6 months, she would be with him. She would sit beside his throne, listen to his stories, share the darkness. And Hades, for the first time in thousands of years, smiled. A small smile, barely noticeable. But it was there, at the corner of his lips, in the depths of his eyes. Hope. As he waited for the day Persephone would return, Hades began to change. This change did not happen all at once. It was not like a flash of lightning or an earthquake. It was more like the flow of underground rivers. Slow, steady, unstoppable. Every day, every hour, every moment, something stirred within him. Something reshaped itself. The first change was in his gaze. As he sat on his throne, he no longer stared into the void. His eyes truly saw his kingdom. The dark waters of the Styx, the pale meadows of Asphodel, the distant glow of Elysium. Before, this view had been a punishment for him. A prison, a place of exile. But now he was beginning to see it differently. This darkness was not something to be feared. This darkness was something to be protected. One day he rose from his throne and began to walk. He traveled to every corner of his kingdom, rediscovering every detail. He stopped in the meadows of asphodel, among the pale flowers. These flowers were not as bright as those on earth, yes. Their colors were pale, their scent faint. But they were there. In the midst of darkness, in these depths where light could not reach, they were still there. And that, in itself, was a miracle. He went to Elysium, the place where heroes rested, the island where virtuous souls found peace. Here there was light, there was warmth, there were even birdsong. And the souls were happy. There was peace on their faces, acceptance in their eyes. They had lived their lives well. They had accepted their deaths. And now they deserved their eternal rest. Hades watched them, and he understood something. Death was not an end. Death was a transition. And he was the guardian of that transition. He was the protector of that transformation. Darkness was not terrifying. Darkness was where everything began. Seeds sprout in darkness. Babies grow in darkness. Stars shine in darkness. Without darkness, light was meaningless. Without night, day was worthless. And Hades, as Lord of Darkness, was part of the universe's balance. This understanding did not lift the burden from his shoulders, but it made carrying the burden easier. He now saw this burden not as a punishment, but as a duty, as an honor, as meaning. He returned to the edge of Tartarus, the place where he had wept that night. He stood at the edge of the abyss and looked down. The darkness was still there, infinite and deep, but he no longer saw it as a monster that would swallow him. He now saw it as a part of himself. "I am this darkness," he said quietly, "and this darkness is mine." This time the words did not disappear into the abyss. The words returned to him, like an echo, like an affirmation. And Hades, for the first time, felt at home in his own kingdom. When Persephone returned, Hades greeted her at the door. He was waiting at the edge of the Styx as Charon's boat approached. As Persephone stepped off the boat, her eyes searched for Hades. When she found him, she paused for a moment, because the Hades before her was not the Hades she had left behind. The same face, the same body, the same obsidian eyes. But something inside him was different. His shoulders were straighter, his gaze calmer, his demeanor more peaceful. It was as if he had shed a burden, or learned to carry it. "Welcome," said Hades. His voice was warm, sincere. It wasn't a forced pleasantness, but a genuine welcome. Persephone walked towards him. With each step, she breathed in the air of the underworld. Cold, damp, but now familiar. She had spent 6 months on the surface under the sun with her mother. But a part of her had missed this place. This darkness, this silence, and yes, this man. "You've changed," said Persephone, standing before Hades. "So have you," said Hades. And it was true. They had both changed. 6 months was both a very short and a very long time. Could have been nothing or everything. And for them it had been everything. As they walked toward the palace, Persephone noticed. In the throne room something was different. There were 2 thrones now, side by side, equal in size, equal in grandeur. One made of obsidian, black and deep, the other of ebony, dark but warm. They were connected on the same platform at the same height. One for a king, one for a queen. Persephone looked at the thrones. Then she looked at Hades. "Did you do this for me?" Hades bowed his head. "For you, and for me, and perhaps, for what we will become." What they would become. These words hung in the air, like a promise, like a hope, like a question. Persephone walked to her throne. She touched the wood, felt its smooth surface, and then she sat down. Hades sat down beside her. Side by side, 2 thrones, 2 rulers, the king and queen of darkness. And in that moment they said nothing. There was much to say, yes, the pains of the past, the uncertainties of the future, the complex feelings between them. But in that moment words were unnecessary. They were simply there, together, and that was enough for now. As time passed, Hades and Persephone's relationship deepened. This was not the love of fairy tales. It wasn't a passion that ignited at a glance, made you forget everything, enveloped the world. It was something different, slower, calmer, more lasting. It was like two lonely souls finding each other in the darkness, like two broken pieces completing each other. Persephone began to transform the underworld. She brought new flowers to Elysium, carried seeds from the surface. She added color to the asphodel meadows, introducing pastel tones among the pale whites. Hades watched, first in astonishment, then in admiration. This woman was bringing light to his dark kingdom. But this light did not destroy the darkness. It existed in harmony with the darkness, complementing it. And Hades changed too. He began to talk more. He told stories of the dead, his own story. Persephone listened to every word, every detail. And she asked questions, she was curious, she tried to understand. This interest was a new experience for Hades. For thousands of years, no one had ever asked him why. No one had ever asked, how do you feel? No one had ever really listened. One night, Persephone asked him, how did you feel inside Kronos' belly? Hades was silent for a long time. No one had ever asked him that question. Not even his siblings, who had lived through the same experience, had ever spoken of it. It was as if not talking about it would make it unreal, as if silence would heal the wound. It was dark, he said finally, an endless, suffocating darkness. But the worst part wasn't the darkness. The worst part was not knowing what was outside, not knowing how long it would last, not knowing if he could get out. And the worst part, he paused, swallowed. The worst part was thinking that no one was looking for me, that no one was fighting for me, that no one missed me. Persephone reached out her hand. Her fingers touched Hades' hand. Cold skin, warm skin, darkness, light. I'm here, said Persephone. I'm here now. And Hades felt, beneath that touch, a wound thousands of years old begin to close. Perhaps you know this feeling too. The easing of a pain you've carried for years, after a word, after a touch. A wound no one saw, beginning to heal when someone notices it. That moment when you realize you're not alone. Something loosening in your chest, breathing becoming easier. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It's not a miracle, a snap of the fingers. It's a slow, patient, sometimes painful process. But it starts. It starts somewhere. And sometimes, all it takes is for someone to say, I'm here. Years passed. Dozens of years, hundreds of years, thousands of years. Persephone came and went every year. 6 months on earth with her mother under the sun. 6 months underground with Hades in the heart of darkness. This cycle never faltered. Seasons turned, the world changed, people were born and died. But Persephone's journey continued, and every time she returned, Hades was waiting at the door. Some years, the goodbyes were hard. As Persephone left for the surface, a shadow would fall over Hades' eyes. 6 months of solitude weighed heavily on him each time. But he could endure that solitude now, because he knew Persephone would return. She would always return, and that knowledge changed everything. Hades now went to Olympus differently. He still went rarely, he still wasn't invited most of the time. But when he went, he no longer sat quietly in the corner. He spoke, he expressed his opinions, he defended justice. The other gods were still uncomfortable with his presence. They still whispered behind his back. But Hades no longer cared, because he knew himself now. He was the Lord of Darkness, yes. He was the God of Death, yes. But that didn't make him evil. It made him different. And being different didn't mean being wrong. Even Zeus noticed this change. One day, after a council meeting, he took Hades aside. "You've changed, brother," said Zeus. What was in his voice? Surprise? Respect? Or just observation? "Perhaps," said Hades. "Or perhaps I've always been this way. Only now I choose to show it." Zeus thought for a moment. Then he did something he rarely did. He placed his hand on Hades' shoulder. "Good," he said. "This is good." And this was one of the longest, most meaningful conversations between Hades and Zeus. But the real transformation took place in Hades' kingdom. The underworld was no longer just a place of punishment. It was no longer a final stop. It was a transition point, yes, but it was also a destination. Elysium expanded. More souls found peace. Even Asphodel became less gloomy, with the flowers and colors Persephone brought. And Hades became known as a fair judge. The dead no longer feared him. People on earth still hesitated to speak his name, yes. But the dead, those who crossed the Styx, trusted Hades' justice. Bribery didn't work here, status didn't matter. Whether you were a king or a slave, you were weighed by the same measure. Whatever you did in life, you received its due. This justice was something Hades took pride in. While Zeus ruled the skies with lightning, choosing favorites and enemies, Hades maintained impartiality underground. While Poseidon played with the waves in the seas, sinking sailors for amusement, Hades showed the same respect to every soul. This did not make him popular, but it was right. And being right was more important than being popular. One day, Persephone asked him, "Have you ever regretted it? Taking this kingdom, living this life?" Hades thought for a long time. He sat on his throne, Persephone beside him. Around them was darkness, silence, eternity. "I used to," he said finally. "Every day, every moment. I longed for the light. I longed for warmth. I longed to be seen. But now," he paused, looked at Persephone. "Now no, because this path brought me here. This darkness found you. And if things had been different, maybe we wouldn't be here now. Side by side, together." Persephone smiled. A small, warm smile. "Then maybe," she said, "the darkness isn't so bad." "Maybe," said Hades, "maybe the darkness is just waiting to be understood. Just like I've been waiting." And this conversation echoed in the throne room. The walls heard it, the floor heard it, the darkness heard it. And perhaps, just perhaps, the darkness smiled too. This story could have ended here. A happy ending, two gods side by side, at peace forever. But real stories don't end that way. Real stories continue because life continues. Even for immortal gods, the story is never truly over. And Hades' story is still being told. Every autumn, when the leaves fall, people whisper that Persephone has descended into the underworld. Every spring, when the flowers bloom, they celebrate her return. And Hades waits for that 6-month reunion every year. Patiently, hopefully, lovingly. Some things never change. Olympus still does not fully accept Hades. He is still not invited to the feasts. The whispers continue, and there are still those who speak of the smell of death. But Hades no longer needs this. He has found his place, understood his worth, and made peace with his identity. And this is the greatest victory. It's not about being accepted from the outside, but accepting yourself from within. Not the approval of others, but your own approval. Not stepping into the light, but shining in the darkness. Now, as you listen to this story, perhaps you are thinking too. Perhaps you know what Hades feels. That loneliness, that invisibility, that question, why am I different? Perhaps you too have seen that distance in people's eyes when you entered a room. Perhaps you too have felt alone at a table, surrounded by people. Perhaps you too are in the dark right now. Maybe everything feels too hard, too heavy, too meaningless. Maybe you ask, why me? And get no answer. Maybe you think no one understands you, no one sees you, no one loves you. So remember Hades' story. He felt that way too. For thousands of years, he felt that way. But in the end, he changed. He changed from within. And that change transformed everything. The darkness was the same darkness, but it was no longer a prison. The loneliness was the same loneliness, but it was no longer a curse. Hades' story teaches us this. Darkness is not a place to fear. Darkness is where transformation begins. And sometimes, in the deepest darkness, you find the brightest light. You find yourself. And here's the paradox. The God everyone feared the most was actually the most faithful. He never cheated, never looked at anyone but Persephone. While Zeus had dozens of lovers and Poseidon sought adventures in the seas, Hades remained devoted to one heart. Thousands of years, the same love, the same devotion, the same loyalty. The Lord of Darkness was the most enlightened with his heart. The God of Death lived the deepest life. The loneliest one forged the most enduring bond. Perhaps what you thought you lost is actually the beginning of something else. Perhaps your current darkness is the seed of tomorrow's light. Perhaps your loneliness is the precursor to true togetherness. Who knows? Now take a deep breath. Feel your chest expand, your ribs open. Then slowly let go of everything. The burdens of the day, the worries of tomorrow, the regrets of the past. Tonight, let this story stay with you. Think of Hades, sitting on his throne, waiting for Persephone. Think of that patience, that hope, that love. And know that no matter how deep the darkness, one day the light will come. Sometimes from outside, sometimes from within. But it will come. It always comes. Your eyes are growing heavy now, I know. Your body is relaxing, your mind is slowing down. This is good. This is right. Let yourself go, drift into sleep. And when night falls, do not be afraid. Darkness is not your enemy. Darkness is the home of rest. Like Hades' kingdom, a place that seems terrifying but is actually peaceful. Sleep well tonight, and tomorrow, when you open your eyes, remember, even after the darkest night, dawn breaks. It always breaks.